Very warm welcome. I'm Gerard Villuan, the Asia Pacific Regional Director of the World Justice Project. And on behalf of all of us at the World Justice Project, thank you for taking time out of your busy schedules and for joining with us at the World Justice Challenge 2021 Asia Pacific Regional Finalists Showcase. We have an exciting 2 hours ahead of us of program, and thank you so much for being on board once again. I would like first to record our warm appreciation to the World Justice Challenge sponsors and partners. And in particular, we are honored. You can see some of these sponsors and partners on the slide in front of you right now. And in particular, we are honored to partner with the Asia Foundation and the Asia Development Bank on this regional showcase today. From the Asia Foundation, we are pleased to have Kim McQuaid. Kim is the Managing Director at the Program Specialist Group. Kim, as you can see on the slide right now, brings his wealth of knowledge and experience to today's proceedings. And moving on from the Asian Development Bank, we are delighted to have Cecil Sikango. Cecil is the Senior Legal Officer on the Law and Policy Reform Program in the Office of the General Counsel. Cecil also brings her wealth of credentials and experience to our showcase. Kim, Cecil, thank you once again for taking time to be with us and being on board with us at the World Justice Challenge. Now, let me give everyone a quick rundown of today's events, which essentially has 3 parts. First, Kim, Cecil, and I will have a conversation about how the rule of law in the Asia Pacific region has been impacted by the pandemic. And we'll find out more about their views, insights, and the work that they're doing in response to this. Second, we will also hear about the great work of other rule of law stakeholders and organizations in the region, specifically the 7 World Justice Challenge finalists from the region, which will give us a 3 minutes presentation about their work, after which I will then ask each presenter 1 follow-up question for a minute to respond. And then you can see right now all the finalists that we have in the challenge peppered all over the world. Third, we will divide into breakout rooms with 1 project in each breakout room. There you'll also have the opportunity to ask your follow-up questions. There'll be 3 rounds of breakout rooms, each lasting 8 minutes. Once the first round is up, a message will appear and you'll be able to choose a different breakout room to enter so you can ask and hear from another project. My very helpful colleagues will be in each room to tell you more and help you in any way possible. So what is the World Justice Challenge 2021? Well, based on the theme of advancing the rule of law in a time of crisis, it is a global competition to identify, to recognize, and promote good, accountable governance practices and high-impact projects and policies that protect and advance the rule of law in this time of crisis. Identifying, acknowledging, and promoting good governance, good practices, and promising approaches are essential to addressing the crisis' underlying governance challenges, to supporting an effective recovery process, and to building back better rule of law-based societies. So in short, we seek to protect the rule of law from urgent threats generated by the pandemic and to recover and to rebuild the rule of law over the longer term. Cash awards up in the amount of $20,000 US will go to 6 projects. 6 projects that show results and promising prospects for future progress, replication, and scaling. All of these great finalists are being currently profiled on the Challenge website, are featured in regional showcase events like today, and they're all available to answer your questions and discuss their projects on the World Justice Challenge Community Forum. And I'm glad to see quite a number of you have been taking part in our community forum. So please do keep your great questions coming in. If you haven't joined the Challenge Community Forum, there's a link in the chat with which you can have instructions on how to join and be part of this great conversation. Following the last regional showcase next week on April 14th, 5 winners will be chosen by a committee of very experienced judges from a broad spectrum of fields and expertise. One winner will be selected by you by popular vote. You may request a ballot by logging on to the community forum. Click on the vote section of the forum and complete the request a ballot form. Voting will open on April 15th and close on April 30th. Finally, 1 out of the 5 winners chosen by a judging committee will receive the World Justice Project's first ever Ruth Bader Ginsburg Legacy Prize, to be awarded to the project that best exemplifies, best captures the fight against inequality and gender-based discrimination. All of us at the WJP are thrilled to say that this year we have received about over 425 submissions from 114 countries all over the world. From these 425 submissions, 30 finalists have been selected to take part in regional showcase events like this one, as you can see on the map right now again. But also allow me to say that we also have a number of projects earning honorable mentions. And you can find out more about these honorable mentions on our website about their great work in the region, including in Cambodia, Indonesia, Philippines, and Nepal. And on that note, I would like to welcome back Kim and Cecil. Hi, Kim. Hi, Cecil. How are you guys doing?
Very well, thank you, Gerard.
Hi, Gerard.
Good.
Hi, everyone.
Hi. So as Kim, Cecil, as we all know, the Asia-Pacific region, like other parts of the world, have witnessed unprecedented upheaval, challenges, and issues since the outbreak of the pandemic in early 2020. And to be more specific, in the 4 areas that our challenge and our finalists are addressing: access to justice for all, accountable governance, fundamental rights and non-discrimination, and anti-corruption and open government. We have seen cases, we've been reading about cases of price gouging and lucrative contracts being awarded without proper due diligence, without proper procurement processes. Emergency powers have been expanded and even abused in some circles. Fundamental rights, justice needs have been impinged. Minorities in particular have been victims of discrimination, violence, and harassment. Some of these cases are being addressed, and we'll find out more when our great panel of finalists come on board pretty soon. But in the meantime, let's set the scene for everyone here present, and we'd like to hear your thoughts as well. If I may start first with one question to the both of you. What have you seen as the main effects of the pandemic on the rule of law in the region? And perhaps if I may also add on to that, what do you think is the most worrying in your perspective? Can I call upon Kim first?
Sure. Thank you very much, Gerard. Well, as you've already intimated, I think it's rather obvious, bordering on crass, to say that the pandemic has been broad and devastating. But I think for us at the Asia Foundation, what's probably been most striking is the combination effects, including a variety of knock-on consequences that flow from others. And so among those, the health consequences, clearly, with the severity of the pandemic often underreported by governments, with a whole series of rights implications. The economic implications have been tremendous across the board, but they've been especially serious for vulnerable groups, women, marginalized communities, and others. And in more particularly in the realm of rights and access to justice, we've seen in particular spikes in gender-based violence, the interruption of legal support services, with profound implications for the security, again, of women and girls, to which I'll turn a little bit later tonight. And then governance, again, we've seen sweeping implications both for and of governance, with the pandemic telling us a lot about governance standards and their implications. And then finally, cutting across these multiple implications, the challenge of access to trusted information, which I think probably among all of those things that we have seen and been concerned about, I would probably say governance and information flows, simply because it cuts across this whole combination of knock-on implications of the pandemic. So I'll stop there.
Thank you, Kim. Cecil?
Hi, before I answer that question, I'd just like to say that this feels like coming full circle because I was a finalist in the World Justice Challenge 2 years ago. So to all our finalists today, good luck, have fun, and you will look back at this fondly. To answer your question, ADB estimates that between 1.4 to 2.2 trillion in losses have been incurred by Asia Pacific countries in 2020 alone. And what is worrying about this is the pandemic has pushed 158 million people back to poverty. So this is not just 158 million people in poverty, but an additional 158 million back in poverty. The pandemic has also hampered or reversed the gains that we have made for SDG 1 and SDG 2, which is ending poverty and ending hunger. And we've seen that women and other vulnerable groups have been disproportionately affected by the pandemic. So for example, migrant communities who don't have formal recognition in the law and therefore could not have formal help from governments. We have seen the increase in child marriages. We have seen an exponential increase in gender-based violence because women are forced to lock down with their abusers in their homes. And we have seen a lot of kids dropping out of schools or being because schools were closed. We also see, for example, support services have been hampered. This would refer to judges, police, and shelters that have been closed or have been repurposed as health centers. We also see the disproportionate effects of the healthcare, this pandemic, on women, because women are disproportionately numbered as healthcare frontliners. They are midwives, they are community center personnel, they are nursing assistants, they are nurses. But the sad thing about this is that a lot of women work in the informal economy. So the burden of unpaid work and the COVID has increased the burden of unpaid work and domestic work. I think the overarching theme, especially with respect to the rule of law, is the effect of COVID on access to justice. We have seen courts closed, not just closed, but we have seen judicial officers unable to do their work, especially in least developed countries that do not have internet, a good internet penetration rate, or do not have the hardware that could support remote court proceedings. So basically that's that. We have a lot of environmental, social, and economic consequences. We have seen a spike in pollution. At first, people thought that COVID will bring about this resurgence in, this will be good for the environment, but that has turned out to be short-lived. Despite the massive economic downturn, global emissions have only been reduced by 7%. And at this point, when governments have started to reopen economies or are starting to think of stimulus packages, it's important that we do it from the viewpoint of green growth. Because otherwise, if we stimulate the economy if we don't focus on sustainable development, we have seen some governments in the region trying to stimulate the economy by regressing environmentally in terms of policies. So we've seen a lot of cross-cutting issues and a lot of cross-cutting concerns. Yeah.
Thank you, Cecil. It's very it's alarming to hear about the statistics that you mentioned. It's also quite sobering, the scene that you painted out about in the region. And both of you mentioned about gender-based discrimination and women being an overwhelming group that's been in suffering as a result of the pandemic. And a couple of our finance projects coming on later on will talk about this as well. So now that we've heard about what you think about what's been happening in the region, can I call upon you to tell us more about what your Asia Foundation, Asian Development Bank has been doing in dealing with these effects? Can I ask Kim first, please?
Sure. Thanks very much, Gerard. And I'll just begin by saying thanks, joining others in saying thanks to our friends at the World Justice Project for organizing the challenge, and congratulations to all of our finalists. We look forward to hearing from you later this evening. A brief word about the Asia Foundation for those who may not be familiar with our work. So we're an international NGO founded in 1954. We're headquartered in San Francisco. We have a liaison office in Washington, D.C., where I now work, and we operate through 18 country offices across the 3 sub-regions, Southeast and Northeast Asia. We work in 5 core program areas: governance and law, women's empowerment and gender equality, inclusive economic growth, environment and climate action, and international relations. And rights and justice, access to justice figure in the work of the foundation. It's formally tied to our governance work, but it's cross-cutting across all of those areas. And we find that if you scratch the surface of virtually any development challenge, you'll find an underpinning law, rights and governance related dimension, and COVID has certainly underscored just how significant that is. So we have been fortunate in the sense that together with many organizations, we were affected by the immediate implications of the COVID lockdown last March, but we were able to swiftly sort through those operational challenges and to focus on programs. And so we were able, with the blessings of our donors and in partnership with our partners in government, civil society, and the private sector, we were able to pivot virtually all of our programs in response to the pandemic implications. Some of those I'm going to focus on a little bit later, but just briefly, rights, access to justice, and security of vulnerable groups, governance, to which I'll come back. Cecilia's already mentioned economic security, and particularly the implications for the most vulnerable quarters of the economy, the informal sector and other areas. We've seen striking implications of the pandemic from a rights and justice perspective for sub-regional and cross-border conflict regions of Asia. Many parts of Asia, Mindanao, Thailand's southern border provinces, the border regions of Bangladesh and Myanmar, and the Afghanistan-Pakistan frontier, all of those places that are dealing with protracted conflicts or fragile peace arrangements have had really significant implications from the pandemic that we've been able to respond to programmatically. And finally, as Cecile said, environment and climate implications, that the environment has had a little bit of an unexpected holiday, I guess, as a result of COVID, but we're now significantly concerned about the post-recovery period. And we've recently worked in partnership with another organization to do a 4-country study of the recovery policies through the lens of green growth. So, Clayton, if we can go to the next slide now. Oh, I'm sorry, that was the second slide, sorry. So I'm going to do a slightly deeper dive now to talk about 2 areas that are perhaps most particular to the focus of the justice of the challenge. And that is protecting the rights and security of vulnerable groups. So again, gender-based violence. And we've seen that the gendered impact of the pandemic has been felt in countries and communities across Asia and the Pacific region, especially significant for women and girls with a spike in domestic violence. We've seen services for survivors of violence being disrupted or maxed out because of the spike. We've noticed that the gendered impacts of the pandemic have affected people of all genders. Women are more affected by COVID, while men are more likely to die from the virus, which in turn leaves more women-headed households to manage the crisis with minimal resources. Thanks to the flexibility of our donors, we've been able to pivot a number of our programs. So in Cambodia, we've supported community outreach programs to combat gender-based violence, online training sessions with youth groups, community facilitators, health center staff, and others. Similarly, in Bangladesh and in Indonesia, leveraging technology and longstanding networks of community members reaching right down to the grassroots to deliver legal services to women, counseling services, longer-term support facilities and things. And then hand in hand with that, while we've been concerned broadly with the economic implications of the pandemic, we've tended to focus particular attention both to women and to broader marginalized communities and supported a variety of legal policy and other measures to safeguard the economic rights of vulnerable groups. So we've undertaken studies in Southeast Asia to understand the country by country and the broader regional implications of the pandemic, looking both at the situation now and also looking forward to the recovery. Business counseling hotlines in a number of countries, including Mongolia. We've been very struck by the digital divide. We were already interested in the whole phenomenon of the future of work, but with the pandemic now, we have seen with the persistent digital divide that for the owners of the smallest industries, representing up to 99% of businesses in Southeast Asia, their future success is really contingent on access to more digitally literate workers, and underpinning all of those concerns are legal and policy measures to which we and our partners have to respond. Cecile also mentioned migrant workers, and we have been undertaking a series of research activities to look at that phenomenon, and struck by the fact that among the tens of thousands of migrant workers who return to their home bases in Asia, ordinarily you would think that that coming home might be a positive thing in very difficult circumstances, but we've seen quite the contrary, ranging from support measures put in place by government not being adequate to things like stigma attaching to migrant workers who are returning in their communities, being ostracized and being seen as a drain on the economy. And so we've done a lot of work with governments across South and Southeast Asia to adapt their legal measures to better accommodate the migrant workers who are coming back, but also to recognize that in the recovery period, they bring a lot of skills that if they can't return to working overseas, can be put to effective use in other places at home as well too. On now to the governance response. As I mentioned earlier, that the pandemic has taught us a great deal about what governance standards look like in Asia, and typically countries that have been fettered by weak governance have tended to fare more poorly in terms of rights protections, access to justice, the flow of information, and various support mechanisms. The one positive thing in all of that is that we have seen, particularly in the realm of economic recovery and rights, policies that had been very stubborn pre-COVID, suddenly with the economic expediency of action, we've been able to push through with partners a lot of adjustments to the laws and policies that might not have been able to move forward quite as swiftly in ordinary circumstances. A word about civil society. We have always been interested in the phenomenon of shrinking space. It has implications both for the Asia Foundation, but more particularly for our partners. And we have undertaken some research in Southeast Asia and other quarters that have looked at the role of civil society in the pandemic, and particularly what kinds of implications civil society has experienced. And one thing that we've learned is, no surprise, that CSOs across the region have providing essential services to the most vulnerable communities, often stepping in for governments where the capacity is strained. Civil society itself is struggling to cope with the pandemic, particularly just in the context of being able to reach the most remote and the most difficult to most challenged communities. But then finally, again, in the realm of rights and justice, for CSOs particularly, whose mission involves human rights, access to justice and democratization, that already difficult operating environment, a number of quarters we've seen being shrunk still further. And so there's quite significant concerns now going forward about democratic backsliding and its implications as a result of the pandemic. And then finally, a word about misinformation. I'll take the example of the Pacific. Well, this is, as I mentioned earlier, the whole phenomenon of information flows has been problematic across the region. But in the Pacific, where the Asia Foundation is newly returned after some gap, we've been especially struck by the implications of the pandemic for the small and fragile economies of the Pacific Islands. Enormous strains on the healthcare systems, and happily, the results have been fairly positive in terms of insulating the region from the virus itself, but the economic consequences have been tremendous. And all of those risks have been exacerbated by the spread of online misinformation and harmful rumors. And part of that reflects internet governance and the regulatory systems that affect the free flow of information in the region, and that the quality and integrity of information. And our technology team undertook a fascinating study that was released a couple of months ago, looking at COVID misinformation, understanding why it was that information was being poorly rendered and poorly interpreted, what some of the broader knock-on implications were for rights and access to justice, and measures that Pacific Island countries could take to correct that. And now, as we get a little bit further along in the recovery process, we're expecting a similar phenomenon in the case of vaccinations, access to vaccinations, and people's willingness to go forward and take the vaccinations. And so we're going to pivot that particular piece of research to look at that dimension as well too. So Gerard, I'll stop there with those few examples.
Thank you, Kim. It's very interesting to hear that you spoke about leveraging technology in response to dealing with the main effects of the pandemic in the region. We'll hear from a couple of our panelists afterwards about how they've been doing so as such. And so it's also interesting to share as well that as we have received over 425 applications from all over the world, the use of technology has really come forward as a pressing main approach that many have been adopting. Perhaps, Cecil, if I may ask you to talk more about what the ADB has been doing in this specific area of leveraging technology in dealing with the pandemic. And perhaps if I could give you 2 minutes, would it be okay with you, Cecil?
Yeah, I understand that we have, a program and we're running out of time for this part of the program. So briefly, ADB is doing a lot in terms of COVID impacts, but I'd like to focus specifically on the law and policy reform program. Can we move on to the next slide, please? So the law and policy reform program, the role of that is the objective is to support the role of legal systems in the region's economic developments. On the right side, you see the areas that we work in, and on the left side, how we do our work. So basically, we do legal and regulatory reforms. We undertake capacity building initiatives for justice sector stakeholders, etc. We tailor these capacity building initiatives, so it's not one size fits all for the entire region. And lastly, we have knowledge resources that anyone like with an internet connection could access. So moving on for ADB's response to the COVID pandemic, specifically the law and policy reform program has assisted ADB in the APVAC, which is the Asia Pacific Vaccine Access Facility. That's a 9 billion vaccine initiative, and it offers rapid support to developing member countries as they procure and deliver effective COVID-19 vaccines. So the role of the law and policy reform program is to make sure that there are safeguards so that vaccine delivery and procurement is fair and equitable. Because sometimes, the rural places, they get the role basically is that no one is left behind. That's the spirit of the law and policy reform program. Secondly, we are training judges and judicial sector stakeholders in efficient and effective adjudication of cases. So we have trained, before COVID, we have trained around over 2,000 judges on climate change and environmental issues, gender-based violence, and commercial law. But what COVID has done is focuses our work on how we can enhance access to justice. So now, before we used to train judges face-to-face, now even the older ones, they find it hard to adapt to technology, but it's necessary at this point. So we do Zoom face-to-face, Zoom capacity building initiatives. We have trained judges. For example, last December, we had a massive capacity building initiative for all Asia Pacific judiciaries through the Asian Judges Network on the Environment. And the theme of the conference was adjudication in the time of COVID. We covered topics such as what are the challenges and solutions for virtual courtrooms? When are virtual courtrooms appropriate? Because it's not appropriate at all times. There are things that you have to consider, like procedural due process, substantive law, access to justice. What do we do to make sure that no one is left at the margins? Like, not everyone will have access to internet for remote court proceedings. So how do we mobilize community engagement? So for example, there have been suggestions to, for example, mobilize libraries or community centers, so that people who in the Asia Pacific region, people usually just have mobile phones, but they don't necessarily have data. So we have to mobilize the community centers and other community stakeholders to enhance access to justice. We have partnered with over 30 Supreme Courts, and we set up a website, www.ajned.org. It's the Asian Judges Network on the Environment, and all our resources are there, all our background papers or decisions of the different Supreme Courts, laws, resources from our capacity building initiatives. We also have like dual language manuals. And for example, in Afghanistan, we have a manual in both Pashto and English, so that it's accessible by not just the stakeholders at the ground, but even development partners, so there's no duplication of efforts. we were also involved in more effective implementation and enforcement of laws and policies. So for example, in Pakistan, we trained around 30 to 40 academics and management officials of LUMS, of the Lahore University of Management Sciences, on online, because of online learning. The kind of GBV has, transcended into the online space, and it's important for people to, or for people, for academics and management officials to know how to respond effectively to those cases. So all of these resources are accessible online. If anyone is interested, I would be happy to direct you, like development partners and our finalists today. I see that there's some nexus between ADB's work and the finalists' work. Anyone who wants to have access to these resources, you can please feel free to reach out to me, and I will be happy to direct you to our online database. Yeah, that's it.
Thank you, Cecil. I'm quite mindful of the time, but yet at the same time, there's one more question that seems to be the back of many people's minds right now, as well, as we're moving ahead in 2021 and beyond. If I could give 1 minute to each of you, what do you think is the most important lesson, takeaway, that you have in your perspective if we were to prepare for pandemic 2.0 something? Over to you, Kim.
Great, thank you, Gerard. Well, I think the first thing that comes to mind is the old saying that what we learn from history is that we don't learn from history. And I think it's very important for all stakeholders, whether it's government or civil society or the private sector, to really absorb the lessons of the pandemic, including, frankly, acknowledging what has and hasn't worked, where the preparation has been not as great as it could be. And we've seen in earlier crises in Asia, the Indian Ocean tsunami and other things, it was a little bit of a mixed result in terms of those frank and objective reflections. And I hope that the pandemic will steer all stakeholders that way. Continuity of support services and infrastructure. Cecile has already given the example of the courts, but when we think about legal services in particular for abused women and girls, the whole gamut of services that are vulnerable to suspension, and what kind of precautions we can put in place to be sure that that doesn't happen in future. Information flows, related to my earlier point about misinformation, but also greater scope for citizen voice and a sense of ownership in digesting what we have learned from the pandemic going forward. And then finally, that sort of ties all of that together, just a word about data, which the foundation is very interested these days in the whole phenomenon of data for development. And I think we would agree that data lies at the heart of almost every dimension of the COVID challenge. We have seen all sorts of data bandied about, and our daily diet of graphs and global trends often masks a real maelstrom of inaccuracies and gaps. And so going forward, I hope that we can collectively tap all of those unfulfilled sources of data going forward to be sure that, particularly in the context of rights and justice, that the law and policy making going forward and access to legal services and the whole gamut of rights issues is informed by much more robust data. So that would be our takeaways.
Thank you, Kim. Cecil?
I have two takeaways from this pandemic and our approach to the rule of law. First is the need for a systemic and holistic approach. You cannot confine issues to convenient categories like, oh, this is health, this is climate change. If COVID has taught us anything, it's that they are inextricably linked. And the separation of the two, I read somewhere it was described as a dangerous delusion, and I completely agree. So the second point that I want to make is that for any COVID response or for any pandemic response, it's important to include women and girls and other vulnerable groups in planning how that response should go. You know what they say, if you're not part of if you don't have a seat at the table, you're part of the menu. And I think that's we have seen that happen. You know how the response has, some of the governments have been, I mean, have not proportionately, there's been no proportional response to vulnerabilities in the different segments of the population. So that's it. I think for whatever response to be effective, the vulnerable people should have a say, and their rights and their entitlements and the should be like front and center.
Thank you, Cecil. Thank you, Kim. I think we all agree that in the past year, the pandemic has cast a pall over the rule of law situation in many parts of the region. However, hearing from you, there's much to be optimistic and hopeful about in your work and others as well, like our 7 finalists today. So on that note, I would like to welcome our 7 World Justice Challenge finalists. And thank you, each and every one of you, for the incredible, the amazing work that you have been doing in the rule of law during the pandemic in Pakistan, Myanmar, Bhutan, Philippines, Nepal, Afghanistan, and the Pacific region. And to recap what I've said earlier, each finalist will have 3 minutes to share. When all presentations are done, wrapped up, each finalist will then have 1 minute to answer the question of what is your project's main strength or takeaway that perhaps others could also learn and potentially follow. So let me call upon first Janet Fezel. Janet Fezel is the manager of Helpline Project at Digital Rights Foundation, and her project and her great work is in the area of fundamental rights and non-discrimination. Over to you, Janet.
Hello, hello everyone. So my name is Janet. I'm from Digital Rights Foundation, and we have a cyber harassment helpline. And as Cecil mentioned, thank you so much everyone for selecting our project. As Cecil mentioned earlier, that there have been now technology facilitated violence is increased, and gender-based violence has seeped in online spaces. So at DRF, we're working on addressing technology facilitated violence against women and gender minorities through technology and through technology and digital solutions. As internet connectivity in Pakistan has increased multifold, so instances of harassment and gender-based violence on online platforms have also increased. So to understand these challenges faced by women in Pakistan, I'll give you a few examples of how this has affected women. There are several cases of women in Pakistan being killed for their online presence or simply owning a phone. In 2014, a mother of 2 was stoned to death after a tribal court convicted her of possessing a mobile phone. Similarly, in 2016, a 16-year-old was killed by her brother for using a mobile phone. Another case was of a woman being shot by a man for uploading a picture online. There's another case of women where she was when she uploaded pictures of her 2 daughters online, they were killed. So there have been such incidences where women have been experiencing patriarchal consequences. Victims and survivors are often punished in other ways as well. A woman was expelled from her home in 2017 by her husband as a result of a fake Facebook profile. These cases of online harassment, blackmail, and intimidation spiked by 145% from January and February to March 2020 in 2020, and 1200% increase was seen in hate speech cases during the pandemic. Given the gravity of the situation, social distancing protocols were there, and the safety of people and the helpline team was of utmost importance. So we came up with technologically oriented solutions and delivery mechanisms. Helpline expanded its services to 24/7 and remotely provided 3 core services, which were digital security support, legal advice, and psychological assistance during the lockdown. Mental health counselors were also appointed to help people deal with mental health trauma and suicidal ideation that comes with harassment. These services were supplemented by a referral network of pro bono lawyers and practitioners through a web portal called Ab Aur Nahi, which provides free legal services and assistance to women who want to pursue cases of harassment. These all these services that DRF has been providing was just to make sure that there is some sort of support available to the victims of harassment, online
Sure.
harassment, because There was no access to justice, or there was no law enforcement at that moment when there was lockdown, and they could not in any way lodge their complaints. In the last
Thank,
4 years,
okay. Thank you, Janet. Would it be possible to, if I give you 10 more seconds, well, I'm just want to be fair and equal to everyone for 3 minutes for the presentations.
yeah. So in the last 4 years, we've dealt with more than 7,000 cases, and every girl every day suffers in Pakistan, and helpline is just there to support them so that they don't have to either die or have to kill themselves because they cannot bear the consequences that the society is going to put on them.
Sure. Thank you so much, Janet, for sharing with us with the super courageous work that you and your colleagues are doing in this very difficult area in Pakistan. Can I now invite Mohammed Nabi Wakar, Country Director at the International Legal Foundation of Afghanistan, to tell us about his work in combating gender discrimination in the criminal justice system in Afghanistan. Over to you, Wakar.
Yeah, thank you so much, and good morning, good evening for all of you. I'm Mohammed Nabi Wakar, the country director for the International Legal Foundation in Afghanistan. The International Legal Foundation is one of the largest legal aid provider in the country. We providing criminal defense services in the country. Since 2003, we have represented over 65,000 of people. Our World Justice Project is addresses discrimination against women and girls in Afghanistan criminal justice system, and we filling the critical gap by providing the re-entry support services to the girls and women. We want to make sure that formerly incarcerated women and girls in Afghanistan are provided with a safe and successful transition back into the society. Women in Afghanistan, like most of in Asian countries, but especially in Afghanistan, they're faced with like unfair prosecution, in incarceration, in high levels of gender-based violences, even before the COVID-19. And have been further marginalized and threatened during the pandemic and during the COVID-19. We fought for the amnesty authorizing the release of these women and girls during the COVID-19, but that wasn't enough. Women and girls have have safe places to go there when they left the prison or when they release back. So that was also one of the challenge. Actually, they were threatened like gender-based violences, like domestic violences, and virtually there is no resources for them to access, especially upon release from the prison. The women need like safe places to live, and also they need help seeking divorce from abusive spouses, regaining their child custody, obtaining mental health services, and finding employment. So those were also like the problems that currently exist in the country, and especially for the women and girls. Yeah, what's our solution? So I live re-entry program, making sure that the women and girls get holistic support. They need to return home and family safely, and they rejoin the communities back. I brought experts from around the world in to train the defense leaders here in Afghanistan. Our leaders are now trained in identified areas of vulnerability in use of client-centered approaches to develop gender-sensitive and trauma-informed re-entry plan. Our leaders have arranged for emergency services upon release, such as shelter access, and have arrange emergency services upon release, such as transport. We also assist women and girls with urgent family in civil law matters, and connect them with the medical, mental health, in trauma-related services through referrals. We supply women and girls with reentry kits containing like personal cares, essential like cell phones, emergency contacts, some leaflets for awareing them regarding the COVID-19 and their effects. So that was also like one of the program that we provide for the women in when they release back from the prison. Uh, uh,
Sure, thank
what
you,
is
thank
our
you.
impact?
Thank you. Like I mentioned, I would like to be mindful, everyone be mindful of the 3 minutes allocated to everyone, so that everybody has a fair chance to share about the great work that you're doing. Mohammed, would you be able to wrap up in about 10 seconds or so?
Yes, thank you. So yeah, since May 2020, we have provided the holistic support to more than 150 women and girls across 15 provinces in Afghanistan. But every day there are women and girls that they are in risk. And we have learned more about them in the women and girls upon the criminal justice system. The significant discrimination and abusive face all stages of the criminal process in unmet. So most of important them that planning to that continue centering to voice of the impacted women and girls in find solution for them, in provide like green tickets for them, to provide like facility to rejoin back the society. This was like overall impact of us in order to make them a part of the society and families back.
Sure. Thank you so much, Mohammed. We will find out more about the great work you're doing in the breakout rooms as well. I just want to check that everybody is able to see the blue sky timer in front of his or her screen. Just want to say that we respect everybody's time. The allocated time is 3 minutes, and I'll be grateful if everybody were to be mindful of that. On that note, can I invite upon Namgay Dorgi, Justice Sector Advisor, UNDP Bhutan, who is telling us more about how his organization is ensuring access to justice for all. Namgay, please.
Thank you, Gerard. Now about the project, we are trying to integrate the community video conference facilities to the existing courts e-litigation project. And Bhutan, to give a context of Bhutan, it's around less than 40,000 square kilometers and a little less than 700,000 people. The geography of Bhutan is in the Himalayas, so very difficult terrains to navigate, and travel time often takes a long time. And the population is sparsely distributed across the country. And because of this, there's a lack of willingness of people to approach courts because of the distance and travel time. And COVID-19 has certainly made situations worse for this. And due to this situation, informal digital solutions have been adopted by the judiciary. It's also been formalized, and approvals been given to undertake informal digital solutions. But however, there seems to be an access gap in terms of accessing justice, especially for rural communities with the central agencies. Oftentimes, the courts are in the major capitals, and the rural communities, due to travel time, have a difficult time to access that. Now, what we found out was community centers are already there, and then video conference facilities are also available, but that has to be upgraded so that the e-litigation platform that is developed can be accessed by the members of the community. In terms of what we are proposing is that we want to upgrade the community centers so that those become accessible to people, because community centers, what we found out, is very close to where majority of the people in rural areas reside. And this will also give access to vulnerable groups, which often have difficulty in accessing courts because of distance and very terrainous terrain. Now, this digital solution will not only help the vulnerable groups, but also in terms of becoming the new normal, it will be a solution for accessing justice by curtailing travel time and costs also. This also will assist the government institutions like the prosecuting agencies, which have to travel to around 20 districts in the country. Now, in terms of impact, what we see is this has certainly brought in systemic changes within the judiciary. Now they've moved on from conventional ways to accepting digital solutions. And this now the geographic distance also is no longer a problem because of the digital solution that is there. And justice has come within reach of the community. And this solution will also enable uploading and downloading of documents from the and we do not have to use any paper. The solutions are already there in the e-litigation platform. That is now in the future, what we are thinking is of integrating the investigating and prosecuting agencies within the system also, whereby there will also be access from the police detention centers to the courts e-litigation platform.
Sure. Thank you, Namge. Will you be able to just have a closing sentence now?
So by this integration of community centers, the access has been brought to the doorsteps of the people. Thank you.
Thank you, Namge. Can I call upon Pradip Paria, Executive Chairperson at the Samhita Foundation in Nepal, please?
Thank you so much. Thank you very much. Thank you, everyone. The slide is there. Do you have a slide? Can I share my slide?
Yes, you can go ahead, Pradeep.
Yeah, I would like to share my slide. If you don't have, I'll share that.
There you go.
Okay, thank you very much.
Just to say, Pradip, you have 3 minutes, please. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you very much. When society faced unprecedented crisis, the oppression experienced by those at the bottom of the social hierarchy became intensified. When Dalit community suffering from historic caste-based discrimination and untouchability was confronted with the COVID-19 crisis, the violence against Dalit community increased. Within 5 months of COVID-19 lockdown, 23 Dalits were killed in group lynching, in police custody, pushed to suicide after rape, and starved to death. Within this context, Samhita Foundation initiated Jaat Ko Prashna, the caste question, a 12-episode television program aimed at ignite caste conversation at the household. Impunity against caste indignities persist because of lack of honest self-interrogation by the Nepali society and because of ineffective state action against the perpetrators of caste-based discrimination and untouchability. If the Nepali society refused to confront the caste questions, the indignity and inhuman treatment suffered by the nearly 4 million Nepali Dalits will continue to jeopardize generation of Dalit futures. Jaat Ko Prashna has brought hitherto neglected and negated voice before the Nepali nation. Ex-Prime Minister, the Inspector General of Police, and the Attorney General made public commitments to uphold the dignity and rights of Nepali Dalits. Sudur Paschim Province tabled its Dalit Empowerment Bill following its Chief Minister appearance on the program. The Chief Minister of Province 2, another guest from the Dalit Development Committee for his province. When members from Samhita Foundation visit Dalit community, they are often asked about why Jaat Ko Prashna has stopped. They ask, what can we do to help you continue? The community feels that its questions are given a voice. Jaat Ko Prashna is Samhita Foundation attempt to amplify the voice of Dalits who have been struggling to be heard of centuries. Zaat Ka Prashna is an effort to give voice to stories of Dalit mothers like Kali Dhakal Mijar, whose son Ajit was lynched for falling in love with an upper caste woman. Thousands more still wait for justice. We saw in our presentation also. We hope you will join in this endeavor to end all form of caste-based discrimination and untouchability and the emancipation of 250 million Dalits worldwide. Thank you very much for choosing us, and thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Pradip. Thank you so much for sharing with us about the great work that you're doing. As we have discussed earlier, we are seeing many parts in our neck of the woods, Asia Pacific, of discrimination against minorities, and it's outstanding the work that you and your colleagues are doing. And thank you very much for sticking with the 3 minutes as well. On that note, can I call upon Frey Songgil, the co-founder and president of Leotech Software Labs Incorporated Philippines, to tell us about her work in anti-corruption and open government. Frey, over to you, please.
May I request my slides to be projected, please? There, thank you so much. All right, so hello everyone. I'm Frey from Leotech Labs, and I'd like to introduce the Ocdex Project, an open contracting analytics and monitoring platform used for public procurement monitoring, research, and business intelligence. Next slide, please. Thank you. Inefficiencies and corruption in government procurement leads to unfair and substandard service delivery, which, long story short, affects the public's value for money and experience. We have in the Philippines, the Philippine Government E-Procurement System, or PhilGEPS, and it releases official procurement datasets of all the procuring entities in the Philippines in chunks of Excel files with hundreds, thousands of rows per file. But the datasets can be intimidating and resource heavy, and it's not yet of good quality by international open data standards, which is why, even though procurement data is technically available, it's not that accessible and usable, especially for the ordinary citizen. And this leads to an information and access gap, and there's a lot of unused insights and potential resting in those unused data. Next slide, please. Thank you. So Ocdex is a public procurement analytics portal, and it uses official government procurement data to generate automatically live analytics. It hosts various machine learning and ICT tools that clean and analyze and visualize procurement data to reveal various trends and red flags. The clean datasets are also re-uploaded in the site for public use, and it has a repository of published studies, reports, and insights accessible to the public, and capacity building and training materials as well. Next slide, please. So since the project started in 2018, up to present, we are able to do the following. So first, our current local government partners are regularly receiving insights to improve contracting practices and related decision-making. We also work a lot with small contractors, specifically on how to inform their bidding strategies using procurement business intelligence. We have a lot of studies on this. And three, we are also able to create automated process miner to automatically flag process deviations and inefficiencies using the live procurement data. Four, we partnered with local CSO to inspect HIV/AIDS related procurement to demonstrate that it answers key advocacy questions. And finally, in 2020, we worked with teams of engineers and faculty, and we used procurement data to monitor COVID-19 related procurements and assess efficiency and identify red flags. So we have full documentations and papers for every impact. If you'd like to know more, please, methods, mechanisms, please feel free to post your questions or ask in the breakout rooms after this. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Frey, for that. It's great to see that, because we've known since the pandemic has started how important of having open, accessible data to everyone. Can I call upon Helen Burrows, Director of International Programs at the Federal Court of Australia, to tell us more about Pacific Judicial Strengthening Initiative. Over to you, Helen. We can't hear you, Helen.
Okay. Thank you. I had to unmute in two places. Thank you, Gerard, and thank you also to everybody at the World Justice Challenge for having us here today. We appreciate it. So the Pacific Judicial Strengthening Initiative supports courts, justice, and the rule of law across 15 Pacific Island countries. The realities and needs of facing Pacific courts and the communities they serve were radically affected by COVID-19. Isolation and physical distancing requirements presented unprecedented challenges for courts to remain open and to deliver well-governed and accountable justice. In addition, as we know, the restrictions on human movement resulted in rapid and sharp increases in the number of women and girls suffering gender and family violence. And pre-COVID, this type of violence was already occurring around the region at more than twice the global average. To respond to these needs, we rebuilt the initiative. We pivoted all our activities to be conducted remotely, enabling our partners to adapt quickly and confidently in an evolving environment. We equipped courts with the technological systems, tools, processes, and capacity to remain open, including remotely. Initially, it was challenging for some to accept and adapt to using new and more technologies. But now, however, judges and court staff comfortably use Zoom, for example, to conduct virtual hearings. A fundamental change in court culture has transformed how courts are operating across the region. Urgent cases and those involving vulnerable witnesses are also being heard in the majority of our partners' courts, even when the parties and judges cannot be physically present in the courtroom. We've provided training on international and domestic law and contemporary approaches towards the unacceptability of gendered violence. We've also developed, socialized, translated, and supported the use of toolkits on gender and family violence, human rights, and conducting remote hearings, and supported outreach to remote communities previously marginalized from the formal system. As a result of this support, Pacific courts are measurably more responsive to gender and family violence cases, and there is evidence of considerable improvements in the way justice is being administered. Community perception surveys record substantial improvements in public trust in the judiciary, and more cases are being filed as a result. Additionally, delays and backlog have in some courts been halved, and case disposal rates have correspondingly increased. And through courts' capacity to collect and analyze and publish case and performance information, we also know that significantly more people are now accessing justice to protect their rights. These results are major advancements, and they will outlive the pandemic, as will the unswerving commitment among the region's courts to administer justice, withstanding any challenge. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Helen, for that. It's amazing to see how the initiative is leveraging on technology, a common thread that we've seen in many of the applications, finalist projects that we have seen so far. And it also makes me wonder what would be the situation be in our neck of the woods if this pandemic had broken out a couple of decades ago, where the prevalence of technology is not as vast and massive as it is now. Well, can I now call upon Monsieur Raphael Mimon, Head of Programs at Horizontal, to tell us more about Teller. Raphael, please.
Thank you, Gerard, and hello, everyone. Thank you, everyone from the World Justice Project team. So my name is Raphael. I am with Horizontal and presenting Teller right now. So one of the things that we've observed in the past few years is a shrinking civic space. And I think that's something that all of us have been able to notice in really all corners of the world on all continents. And what that means concretely is that a lot of activists and journalists have faced harassment, detention, and violence from the governments or from non-state actors. COVID-19 has made the situation much worse, with governments cracking down on civil society for criticizing some of the measures or for criticizing some of the lack of transparency in the measures taken by governments. So the conclusion that we've really observed is that human rights documentation, the very act of documenting human rights violations has become increasingly dangerous for the people doing the work on the ground. So our solution is Teller, which is a mobile app available on Android at the moment and soon on iOS that does several things. The first one is to protect the users who are engaged in documentation. And it does that by encrypting the documentation. So if they film or take photos or take notes of things happening in their community, it is encrypted and safe on the device. The app itself can be camouflaged on the device. So if someone searches the device, they will not be able to find the app and find the documentation. And the user is able to quickly wipe what's in the app. So again, if someone is trying to find incriminating material on their phone. It's also about protecting the data that they collect. So the data can be very quickly and automatically uploaded to a secure server that an organization can then use for advocacy or for court proceedings and so on. And finally, it's about empowering individuals and groups to produce high quality documentation and make it really easy and really accessible to those individuals, including by working very well offline in places where there is bad internet connectivity. In terms of the impact, we've seen TELA used in over 12 countries at this moment, and at this very time, it's currently used in Myanmar since the military coup to document some of the violence by the military junta. A lot of activists have been safer from repression and from violence thanks to TELA when they engage in documentation. We see organizations that have been able to collect data in very difficult environments and keep that data safe from attacks and attempts to tamper with it. And finally, more generally, groups have been able to expose abuse and human rights violations in very, very repressive places, including some of the world's most repressive countries. And that's it for me.
Thank you, Raphael. I see that the work you mentioned about the work in Myanmar, very timely indeed. And I think I speak for all of us here when I say that our thoughts are with the people of Myanmar at this juncture. Now, let me pose the same question to all our finalists today who have 1 minute to answer. I'll be most grateful if you all could follow the timer that's in front of you. And the question is, as we've discussed before, what is your project's main strength, takeaway that others could also learn and potentially follow? Can I call upon Janet Fezel, please? Janet?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay. So our project's main takeaway and strength would be that we've used technology to deal with technology facilitated violence that is being experienced by women and marginalized communities in Pakistan. Given the context of Pakistan, every girl almost every day experiences online violence, and it may come across as innocuous to some in other countries, but in the context of Pakistan, it can be fatal, and it has non-fatal consequences as well. So it's very important that they're supported and empowered, and they're provided with solutions so that their rights are not violated and they can reclaim those online spaces and curb the gender digital divide that is there in Pakistan.
Thank you, Jeanette. Can I call upon Muhammad Nabi Wakar, please?
Yeah, thank you so much. Yes, the Afghanistan justice system is not meeting the need of the women and girls in conflict with the law. So there is like essentially no other resources to support them. So though much progress has been made in Afghanistan criminal justice system over the last 20 years, but it has been largely, I can say, in service of men. So like especially court are set up under the elimination violence against the woman, but still structurally there are problems and there are still like discrimination that women and girls are faced with. The ILF uniquely positioned to support women and girls in contact with the law to collect data about their experiences so that we can reimagine justice for the women and girls and meet the need of the women and girls. So we really hope to be able to expand this project in Afghanistan, and we think this approach can be replicated elsewhere too.
Thank you, Mohammed. Can I have Nabi Doji, please, from Bhutan?
Thank you. Well, COVID was certainly a wake-up call for everyone. So now the new normal being digital solutions, I think our project is taking really the access to justice concept to the doorsteps of the people. That's for people who do not or cannot have access through their own self, but who need help. So the community centers being a state-run or supported enterprises is really very close to communities around the country. So that's the extent of how the people will get access to the already existing e-litigation platform that is provided by the judiciary of Bhutan. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Namge. Pradeep Pariya, please.
Yeah, thank you. Mostly our Jatko Prashna television program provide actually creating space for Dalits and most marginalized people. During the pandemic, our recent research shows that 45% of Dalit lost their job and they don't have a voice. That shows pandemic hit most marginalized people and those who doesn't have access of resource, those who doesn't have access in government offices. So they don't have a space to share their voices. So Jatko Prashna share the place where they can share their voices. Same time, marginalized and excluded community to engage the actor of justice delivery machinery, support the amplify their resistance. That's also important. For example, we had a lynching in Rukum where 26 Dalit were killed, young people killed, and there were no voice. That time, this platform create the voice. Same time, we create the new debate, new knowledge, especially on, for example, Dalit constituency in election process. That kind of things we brought. That's our takeaway.
Thank you, Pradeep. Frey Songil, please, from the Philippines.
So for our key takeaway, information communications technology and data analytics is a very powerful tool in addressing participation and governance gaps. And one thing we observed is that people are more likely to act and call for accountability or raise red flags if they are empowered with the correct information. And living in the digital age, there's so much potential in big data and insights hidden from it. So it can reveal trends and patterns that would have been otherwise difficult to see. And we could even use machine learning and other tools that we could use to supplement our monitoring and continuous call and search for accountability and proper service delivery.
Thanks, Frey. Helen Burrows, please.
Thank you. Our key strength is the direct court-to-court partnership at the initiative's core. It's a judge-led partnership premised on long-standing institutional relationships, mutually shared values, understanding, trust, and respect. The fundamentals of this partnership have been critical in enabling us to traverse and treat many challenges, from immediate operational needs to deep-seated inequalities, particularly during the pandemic. Promoting the rule of law, good governance, and human rights within the context of this partnership has not been the exertion of Western or Northern concepts, but rather the actualization of shared values. These values transcend our different legal, political, and socio-economic realities and commit courts to attain and retain the trust and confidence of those they serve. Our court-to-court model reinforces judicial independence and simultaneously enables us to progress collectively to become individual courts of excellence and to be able to do so irrespective of the challenges we face. Thank you.
Thank you, Helen. Last but not least, Raphael, please.
Thank you. I think what I'm going to share is more of a takeaway than a strength of the project or lesson learned. And really it is that if you're developing technology for vulnerable communities, if we are developing technology for vulnerable communities, we shouldn't assume that we know what the situation is like on the ground. And we shouldn't think that we know exactly what is going to work. Unless we've lived in those communities ourselves for 10, 15, 20 years, we're probably not going to know. And in the best case scenario, the project will fail, but in the worst case, it can actually harm people and it can actually harm those communities we're trying to help. So the takeaway is really to make sure that the communities that those projects are targeting or trying to uplift and empower are front and center in the design and the development of the technology, that it's not just an afterthought or there is a little bit of research. Those people need to be involved from the beginning into the making of the projects.
Thank you, Raphael. I couldn't agree with you more. Hope everyone had a fruitful discussion, finding out more about the finalists and their great work. You can, of course, continue the discussion at our community forum. Before I conclude, just let me call upon Kim and Cecil to say some parting words. You have 10 seconds each. Over to you, Kim.
Thank you very much. It is an overwhelming number of great projects. I think we're all both impressed and inspired. And I think what you have done in terms of taking issues that were already outstanding, that were amplified by the pandemic, to me, I think, in addition to the good work, I think it's all very nice examples of things that we can take advantage of the COVID experience and one of the silver linings in the cloud. So best wishes to everybody, and thanks so much to the organizers for the opportunity to participate.
Cecil.
Thanks everyone for the opportunity to participate. This has been very inspiring. I like the nuances that have been, starkly described. Like, for example, Frey talked about accessibility versus availability, and these nuances sometimes they don't appear clear, but the projects now have shown the important things that we should consider in rule of law projects. Sometimes these rule of law projects spell the difference between life and death, like the Chala project. So thank you again. I leave here very inspired. And again, I was a participant once. So good luck to everyone. Congratulations and best wishes.
Thank you, Kim. Thank you, Cecil. I cannot agree with you more. It's been a productive session indeed, and it would not have been possible without the both of you. Also, allow me to give a super big shout out to my amazing colleagues who've been working so hard to make this event and challenge possible. Some of them it's way past midnight. So thank you, Ted, Joel, Killian, Sally, Jaya, Joe, Becca, Emily, Lindsay. Thank you very, very much. And on that note, thank you for spending your time with us. We are truly grateful. Have a good evening, or a very good day ahead. Goodbye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.